Hi there, Vibe Gardeners. Welcome to another episode of Vibe Gardening Information, where we're going to cover how to design your garden, whether it be your first, or we're going to talk about what I've done in my garden and how I plan to redesign it for 2026. Now, with that said, let's go. All right, guys, so in this episode, we're going to go over a few important topics about how to get that garden started. The first thing we're going to talk about a little bit is going to be where we're going to put the garden. That's the most important thing. We're going to get you guys into a starting place to get success going and a home base for your plants. And then we're going to talk about what you want to grow to make sure that you have no regrets going forward into the season about what you're going to be growing. And then we're going to talk about how to design your garden based on what you're going to be growing. And then finally, we're going to talk about how we're going to acquire what you're going to grow in this garden. Are we going to start from seed? Are we going to be buying pre-germinated plants to plant in your garden? And how to acquire those things? So with that said, here we go. So according to the university extension sites about how to get your garden started and where to put it, one of the things that they mentioned explicitly in that design is you got to make sure that you're going to get enough sun for the plants. Now we're talking about at least 6 to 8 hours of sunlight hitting that area, whether it be in one continuous time frame with no obstruction, or if there's a tree blocking the sun somehow, it's going to be total of 6 to 8 hours. Now, granted, in the northern hemisphere, when we get into this peak of summer, the daylight can be quite a long time. So nothing obstructing it. Here in Michigan, I mean, sunrise is about 7 a.m. or so, and sunset is well into 9 p.m. So we're talking about a good 14 plus hour of sunlight for these plants. And that's a long time for them to get a photosynthesis. And that's going to give you a very nice runway to give them the energy they need to grow. And so the other main thing that you want to consider is that looking at your yard, you want to see the direction of which things are pointed. Now, the best sunlight for growing is generally speaking south facing from the sun for northern hemisphere, and southern hemisphere it's going to be north facing, because in the growing season that's where the sun's going to be hitting the longest. So that's going to be a south facing sun hitting your garden unobstructed. Now if you can't do that, like me, mine's more of the west side of my house, and there's going to be a fence kind of along the way. So I guess it is about like south facing, but it's kind of like a relative thing here. When you look at the obstruction, you want to make sure the sun's coming through at the most from the south. And the thing that for sure is, I'll link below a link to USDA on definition of soil types that you're going to be growing in. And based on the soil, and you're going to think about what kind of soil you want to be growing in. And generally speaking, it's going to be loamy soil that you want to grow in. But let's be frank here, you're not going to have that opportunity all the time. Maybe you have concrete you have to grow on top of, in which case containerizing or having a taller raised bed is going to be your option. Whereas if you have good loamy soil right there, you want to be able to just grow right in the ground or somewhere in between where you want to still do a raised bed or containers for other logistical reasons. So think about where you want to put it based on the soil type you have. Obviously, the better the soil you have on the ground, the easier your setup is going to be. So that should really dictate um, when it comes to nature where things are. Now, for resources of what you can provide, you got to think also about access. You want to make sure that the garden is going to have easy and close access to water supply. So therefore, it's not going to be tedious for you to get the water to the plants. And make sure it's accessible to your house. You want to be close to your doors, especially the kitchen, so that especially for cooking and herbs, you want to make sure that you can get that herb or whatever vegetable you're cooking into the kitchen the easiest. So think about your workflow of what you want to do here with these produce when you're harvesting, or if you're going to be, donating a lot of these things or taking it to the market, you want to make sure it's going to be easy access to the wherever the loading zone for these produce are going to be. So make sure you put it in a place that's going to be optimal for getting water and also for whatever you're going to do with those crops. So Now the next interesting question is, what do you want to grow in this garden? And this is where it gets very interesting. For a lot of people like me, I'm growing it for stuff I want to eat. Now everything I'm planting in it will be supporting whatever culinary adventure I'm going to go on to. Now I've seen on Reddit that's not always the case. Some people want to grow it just for the satisfaction of being able to produce something in their garden, in which case they would take it to the local food bank and donate it, which I find it to be a very noble cause that they're going for. But it's not the same as me here. And another reason that some people would grow things too is potentially to be able to sell in the market. So either of those things are going to dictate what you want to grow. So for me, I'm really into cooking what I want to eat. So tomato, for instance, is one of the things I like to cook. I'm going to grow tomatoes, peppers. I love eggplants for making baba ganoush or other kind of dishes. So I grew a lot of it last year, and I have a lot of herbs because I'm a at-home cook. I like to make sure that I'm able to get the herbs I need fresh from my garden to make sure I would prioritize that. And one thing that a lot of people really underestimate is how much flowers that they need to actually plant in their garden. Because one of the main things that keeps your fruits productive is to have pollinators to come and be able to pollinate your crop so that they can actually produce fruit. Now, without enough, and one of the things that you want to do, you want to make sure you're keeping them healthy because they're essentially invited workers. You want to give them the right diet to keep them healthy, to give them a biodiverse floral for them to dine on. It's going to make sure that they're healthy and you're attracting all kinds of pollinators to make it a very vibrant garden. So those are the things that I generally think about, and also a lot of times I will grow things that, well, it's also kind of like a community gathering event where I will talk with my neighbors about what they grow, and we would swap seeds just for fun. And I will grow it just to see what I get and compare notes. And well, it's just something to talk about, right? It's a bonding moment. It's a very social thing, gardening. So just think about all these things that's going to drive what you want to grow, because that's going to be the driving factor of everything else that's going to go into your season. So when you're laying out your garden, you really want to look at what you're actually growing. So one of the things that you want to do is you want to make sure that you have the right garden bed for them to get into. And the one consideration for sure you want to look at is the width of the garden bed to make sure it's not too wide. Because once you plant it in there, you want to make sure you're not stepping on the dirt of that garden as much as possible. Because compact soil is one of the things that can be a real problem for your plants. So stepping on them will definitely make compaction. So make sure you're giving yourself enough path in between each garden bed. I would say about 2 foot, or I think actually, I'll just put down the metric calculation on the bottom of the screen for you to look at. And that way you're going to have enough space to walk around it. And if you need to, you can kneel. That way you're going to give yourself enough space to be able to work on that bed. And of course, the bed itself, you don't want it to be more than 2 to 4 feet. And the reason for that, I mean, if you have a special long arm, you can probably get to 5 feet and get away with it. And the main reason is you want to be able to reach in there without, well, actually I have to crawl in there, right? For me, I keep it 2 foot because that way I can get my hand in there, and it's not really, if I can't get to the other side, I can still reach it. But other people say you can get up about 4 feet or so, and I stick with two, and that is pretty good. Now the length of the bed is whatever you want it to be, and once that you have that in mind, then you can look at the actual plant you have. And one thing you want to do is you want to do some research before you start planting to see if they're natural companions to the plants you want to grow. Now, the reason for that can be and pest pressure. It can be different climate and weather related stuff that they're going to be adapt to. One thing for sure that I struggled with last season was that I put some of my wife's squash with um, some of the other plants that can tolerate water more. And one of the problem is because of the watering mismatch, I created root rot in her squash and killed it. So that's something that you got to watch out for. Is that you want to make sure that the water demand of the plants are about matching. And you want to make sure also that you're not putting things together that are going to attract the same kind of pest. And that way it's going to really be and also disease. Disease and pests are things that you don't want to accumulate too much pressure from the plants in that garden. So you want to maybe separate them if they're competing. And then there are just plants that just don't like another type of plant. They just don't like them at all. So you got to make sure that you're keeping them apart and keeping them from fighting each other. So those are the things that you really want to think about going forward. And what I would really recommend you do is write down the plants that you're going to grow, and then research and see what are its friends and what are its enemies. Our website will list them for you in a chart format, or just give you in a list format, and then as you can basically do whatever you need to do to basically come up with that pairing. Now, personally, like when it comes to producing produce, you also want to think about the structure of the plant. Now, if a plant is a leaner, sometimes having more bushy plants around it, like for example, my eggplants, I put celery around it. And the celery are generally good companion with eggplant because they can basically come up and become a structural support for leaning eggplants. And that tend to be a winner combination that I've discovered in the past. And really kind of just to make sure that you're giving them enough space so that the plants will be able to get enough light to be able to photosynthesize and grow. To make sure that you don't cram them too tight, or they may actually be able to cram together very tight. For example, lettuce and the leafy green, especially the leafy plants that don't have stems, they tend to create canopies and really collaborate together. So kind of just think about the spacing as well. And those are generally the things that you want to make sure you do. So to sum it up, you want to make sure that you're putting plants together that have very similar watering needs. You also don't want to accumulate too many things that are attracting the same disease or pest. And finally, you want to make sure that you're not packing them too tight together to make sure they can all have enough light. All right, so this image I will show you right here, I'm going to actually link it in the description. This image I'm going to show right now is going to be my garden 2025. As you can see, the house is the middle. I got a deck in the front, and then I got two flower beds in the front with a tomato just hanging out in the corner. So if you follow my channel, that's going to be my bucket container grown cherry tomato. And then, of course, the chaos garden in the front, which I covered in one of my episodes, which I'm not going to get into too much of that because that is that's a more advanced topic of trying to prevent. Well, one of them is to attract pollinators for the chaos garden, and then the pepper and the tomato in the front is to prevent cross pollination, which is a much more advanced topic. I'm not going to go into in this episode. Now, the back garden is the one that we really kind of want to look into a little bit. What I've done is I've put tomato, pepper, and herbs in the garden bed right up against the window, which I show like I've shown the diagram here. And this right here has been a success in that they're together very well, but the climate last year with the heat waves, things were not very productive. That's fine. That's not the fault of what I've done or what the plants are doing together as a collaborative group. But for sure, I want to consider that that's a success. Now, in the microclimate, I'll talk about against the house what that does. And then there's also a oval shaped a little bit, oval rectangular shaped raised bed right next to it. This one has the green bean, celery, and squash in this bed. And this one of them that I found the problem, like I said, is that the squash didn't survive very well. Because the watering schedule, it's dramatically different from the other plants. And I'm definitely going to move that somewhere else. And the bed itself is only about a foot tall. And the reason I did that was all these plants are shallow rooted. And for the squash, it's a little bit tougher push on the root that can handle going through compact soil. So that's why I did it the way I did it. And again, I'm probably going to have a whole another episode on designing raised bed and why I did it the way I did it. But overall, the celery and green beans worked out really well together, and they really liked cohabiting. And the herb garden, so went over from it right up against the outside of the area, the herb garden, which got herbs and strawberry. And the strawberry became a bit of a problem because all the herbs are really Mediterranean herbs that I've been planting, and they really have a different watering need and doesn't seem to really work out together. And also, strawberry can be quite invasive if not careful. As a lot of other content creators have suggested, you want to put them in containers and or in pots, basically, and keep them from being able to spread out of control if you're not going to dedicate the whole bed to it and make sure it's not crawling out of it, which it will do. So strawberry is out. I've actually threw it into the municipal compost already to prevent it from growing. And at the corner, you'll see I have a little bit of a circle there, and that I kind of dug out a hole, and then I put pumpkins in there and pie pumpkins, where I want to basically make it into what I call a pit fighter to try to punch through some of the compact soils. And it did actually fairly well considering the soil it has to deal with once it got past the circle. So that definitely has to continue, and I'm going to hopefully have more and more of them punch through the soil and to make it more workable in the future. And then finally, on the uh, vertical to all the horizontal beds, I have my 2 foot tall bed that has the eggplant, celery, onion, and cucumbers. One thing for sure that happened was the condition was not great for the cucumbers. So I definitely want to move the cucumbers out of that bed this year because it really, as I discovered from conversations with other Reddit users, is that it's probably good to have them in containers and on their own. And then talking to my local farmer, it seems like I should stagger them every 3 weeks. So keep, succession planning every 3 weeks. So that's gonna have to move out. And onion is just I didn't plan for it. I That was a very much impulse purchase, and I didn't plan for it. It did not work well. Onion, if I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna have to figure out how to do it the right way because what I did was not the right way. So we're not putting onion in that bed anymore. And the celery and the eggplant, like I said, they're a great fit together. And one of the things is that as for organizing your garden, you want to consider doing crop rotation. That is a ancient technique that we learned that certain plants will take extra nutrition out of the soil of a certain type. If you rotate them, it will actually be beneficial. Now, frankly, I've never actually done it myself because I've only been gardening for a couple of years right now. And by basically being applying fertilizer, I was able to get away without doing that. So, and also last year was my first year growing my eggplant. I had a lot of Japanese uh, beetle come along and become a real issue. And what I want to do this year is I want to keep the eggplant in the same place because if they, I'm sure they laid some eggs and have babies coming up in the soil there. And if it's going to happen again, I know how to control it with the eggplant in that bed. So I'm going to try to contain the, I guess, the infestation of the Japanese beetles. So I'm going to keep it there and just try to work with it and see how I do this year. For the second year, which is supposed to be worse than last year, and see how I survive that wave. So that's what we'll be doing. And as you can see, it's all throughout the garden. I've also put on marigold. Now, it's a huge pollinator attractor, which is fantastic. But one of the things too is I want to make sure next year I want to also diversify my flowers a little bit. Now, as good as marigolds are, I feel like giving them more diverse diet is going to help their health in the long run. So make sure you put flowers all over your garden to attract more pollinators and more productive garden. And that's what I'm going to do this year with my garden. So I'll probably have another episode on how I actually pull that off. Okay, so now the next decision point is, do I start these plants from seeds or do I go into a nursery and buy them as germinated plants that are in varying stages of growth? And the reality comes down to what kind of space do you have indoors? Well, for those of us who are in colder climates. And for warmer climates, that might not be such a big deal. I personally don't know how to handle that because I've lived in colder climates my whole life, where winter is harsh, nothing can grow outside, and well, starting in spring, things start coming to life. And for climates like this, one of the things is that you gotta really consider what space you have in the house to be able to pull this off. And which have a whole episode on how to do an indoor setup to start your seeds to prepare yourself for the outdoor season. And so, with the spacing consideration, if you have enough space to be able to start all the plants you want to start, then yes, I would say probably starting them is a good idea. But then you also have to take into consideration the effort you put in, because well, with today's market, time is money. I know that's kind of hard to put it that way, but in reality, if you look at it, the more time people's got put into it, the more expensive it gets, right? So you really got to consider what kind of time you can dedicate to starting these plants. Some plants are much harder to start, like lavender. Lavender took me 3 tries, and it's one of the biggest pain to really germinate. And if you're asking me if I were to do it again, the answer is probably no. I don't want to do that again. It's painful. And so for me, if I want to do lavender again, I'll probably go out and just buy some, put it in ground, and then let them propagate themselves, right? That's a clear cut decision right there for me. But for those of you who have limited space, you absolutely should be considering getting your plants pre-germinated. And one of the things that you got to make sure is that you're buying the right stage of life for the plant when you're getting it. So really, I have a no. The next episode I'm going to do is going to be on the scheduling of getting your plants out there. So you want to see what stage they are in the nursery and make sure that they're matching the stage that they should be going out in your climate. Now, granted, not all of them is going to be outdoors, which is kind of weird. I've seen some of that. But if they're outdoors, it may have worked. But keep in mind, especially the more big box stores, the main retailers, that's a nationwide chain, they will try to pull off tricks that you and I will not be able to pull off. Mainly, they try to over fertilize and get their plants huge. And so you got to watch out for that. So the next topic really naturally goes to where you buy these plants. And I highly recommend going to your local nurseries that are not chains. And you can see them developing these plants in their own location, which is going to be local to you. And that's how you know that it's going to be the right season and the right stage of life for you, because that's where they get it. Now, granted, most of them will be started in a greenhouse, and they will usually give you better service by answering better questions for you as you go on and really kind of go into your journey. And frankly, by talking to those people, the workers in the nursery, that's how I was able to make a lot of my plants succeed. Because they know what they're doing. I mean, that's their business, right? To make you succeed. Their business thrives on you succeeding. So it's in their best interest to make you successful. Now, for the next topic really is going to be on seeds. If you go the route of seeds, starting from seed, the best thing again is to buy from local seed providers. Now, me in Michigan, I do have M.I. Gardner, which has a thriving YouTube channel. I highly recommend his stuff. He provides some very high quality seeds from his company. So I'm lucky, and but the thing is, I didn't discover M.I. Gardner until I started a lot of my crop, and I do a lot of seed saving. So I have not bought a lot of seeds since. I if I what I did that was successful for me was going for a reputable seed company that is very good at what they do, like Botanical Interest. But at the Botanical Interest, I generally will find them in Whole Foods and stuff, and they have very, very successful seeds that I'm able to get. And all of them are at least at or above average for germination rate. And then of course I think the worst choice are going to be the national chain store, the brands they go by, like Burpees or Bonnie's. Now there's nothing really wrong with them per se, because if you get the right batch, it's going to be very good. Now, for example, I bought Burpees cilantro last year, I tried to start from seed. Literally only one seed worked out of like the 50 I tried. And yeah, it's not good. And on the package, it's going to tell you the year and the season it's packaged for. And generally speaking, these things will have at least about 3 good years of viability for the seed. So that's the next thing you got to remember. And seed viability is really 3 years. And after that, the drop off is pretty dramatic for a success rate after that. Because you have to remember that the seeds contain all the energy it needs to get that first stage of life going. So as the year goes on, that energy starts fading. So you want to make sure that you're buying for your season and maybe the next season, but definitely after year 3, you don't want to be using those seeds again. And if you have any question about it, you can do paper towel germination, which I'll get to in another episode. So really, this is going to be up to you. If you have access to good local nursery and the local seed provider, local is going to be your absolute best avenue of going forward. And if you don't have a choice for that, you can go and observe how the national chains, how they take care of their plants. You know, just look around and see kind of week by week how the plants progress. Because if you start early, you're not in much of a hurry. You can actually see what's happening, and also having a good idea of the schedule of when things go out and see where they are in the store. You'll have a good idea of if you're getting tricked into some kind of marketing scheme. So that should be how you can acquire good seeds or plants they're going to put out there. All right, guys. So that should wrap up this episode. We'll talk about how to plan for the start of the season, how to get your garden in the right place, how to decide if you want to start from seed or buy them pre-germinated, and how to organize that garden to be able to fit what you want to grow in there, and where to buy them. So that is really what this episode is really about, to get you started. And I'll come out with a further episode on how to go forward with starting our season. So with that said, keep gardening and keep vibing. Let's go.